welcome, and right now we're looking at the armor table.
This is very, very unpleasant. There are some cool things, and there are some very, very uncool things about this table.
So let's look at the core of how armor class is calculated now. Rather than having complex formulas or whatever, and pluses and minuses, pretty much you get your armor, it tells you what the formula you use. For light armor, you add your full dex modifier. Medium armor, you add at most 2 dex modifier. Heavy armor, you don't get a dex bonus. I think that's a pretty neat way of dealing with it.
It's very simple, easy to understand, and it really is actually pretty balanced.
Yeah, there's been more complex systems in the past, but essentially it accomplishes this.
Yeah, they always work towards the same end goal, and this does it with only one step.
Yeah, you don't have to reference, I remember in 4th edition I had to flip. It's like, wait, how do I calculate my AC? I add that, and then half level, and then, I add my bonus for my armor. Now it's like, what's your armor? Check your fucking armor.
Yeah, it's like, oh, yeah, I'm wearing Dragon Scale with +1 dex. Okay, 16, bam, done. Now,
Let's start with the more minor issue. In my opinion, the more minor issue. So, certain ones on these tables give you disadvantage to stuff, as they should. I think some of them should give disadvantage to stealth when they don't, but overall, that's fine. And some of these are redundant, is another issue. Padded armor and leather armor are actually the same except for the stealth difference, and they're only 5 gold pieces. But it doesn't harm to add additional things to the table. But there's no other disadvantages. Before, wearing heavy armor was disadvantages to what? All strength and dexterity?
yeah, and we keep going back to Pathfinder, but it is relevant to discuss their main competitor. Pathfinder actually has a system where you get something called an armor check penalty. An armor check penalty gives you a static penalty to all strength and dexterity-based skill checks. So if you're wearing full plate, you have an awful hard time scaling that cliff, or swimming, or maybe, I don't know, operating a complex device if you're wearing gauntlets.
But with these, swimming and plate, that's fine.
Yeah, you just can't stealth, man.
Yeah, don't hide while swimming in plate.
Yeah.
That's just ridiculous.
You can't hide, you can't hide behind a pillar. That's true. But why is it that your 50 pounds of plate don't hinder you from, I don't know, climbing up a vertical cliff face?
Honestly, the old system was perfect. They should just be, before it was a little different, but it should just be disadvantage on strength and dexterity ability checks for certain types of armor.
Yeah, and that's it. It could honestly use the same table. It just wouldn't say stealth at the top, it would say strength/dex checks.
Yeah. And I feel most medium armor should be okay for strength and dex related checks.
Yeah, hide doesn't really impair you that much. It's just it's a pliable material.
But mostly the heavy armor is where you really should have that kind of penalty. Now, what I consider the much worse thing is, we're going down light armor, medium armor, no speed penalty. That's fine. Medium armor seems better than light armor, but that's just generally how it goes. And if you can use medium armor, it's usually better than light armor. Reasonable, maybe a little bit of a disadvantage would be nice on medium armor, so it's a little worse, but whatever. Only 5 feet of movement reduction for heavy armor?
And not even for all of the heavy armor.
Oh my lord, you could have 18 AC and no speed penalty!
But hey friend, it probably costs a whole lot more than the other 18 AC. Oh wait, no it doesn't. At the point at which you have 5,000 gold, it's not that much of a jump to get to 6,000 gold.
Oh my god. So, I can be a 35-foot moving elf wearing mithril plate.
Correct. But wait, that's only for high-level characters, right? Because that costs a ton. But look at Splint and Bandit. Who the fuck buys Splint mail? Who on earth isn't willing to dish out the extra $250 for that movement? It's not that big. It's really the exact same thing in every other respect, but just costs a little bit more to not have a speed penalty. I guess if you don't care about moving slower, that's okay. But then again, if you don't care, that's a different issue.
This is... So just straight up, they have to fix this, and every single one of the heavy armors needs minus 5 feet of movement. Additionally, I think it should really be minus 10 feet of movement.
Yeah, that's a point of contention, but there's other ways to balance these things out. Mithril Plate perhaps could weigh less or have a magical property. Like if they could say, oh, Mithril's a magical material, all Mithril items do blank. And then you're like, oh, cool, I have Mithril, which gives me protection from grievous blows and from dragons or something.
Or maybe Mithril could just cost a shit ton. I can see that. Like, it's almost it's a magical item level of value.
Yeah, and maybe it gives you an extra AC bonus because it's so awesome.
But right now, they don't have disadvantages to checks, which is a minor thing. It's not. I'm not going to pretend that I've died because I failed my swim check because I was an armor or anything. That happens occasionally, but it's not like a thing that happens every single session. But the big thing is, if there's no penalty to movement, every single character I make, listen to me right now, every single character that I make will have Mithril Plate.
Now let's take a throwback.
I'll take whatever it takes. It's going to happen.
A throwback for a moment. Every character that's not a rogue, by the way. Let's take a throwback here. Earlier we mentioned there is no penalty for casting in armor. This system also doesn't really have, currently, fully fleshed out carrying rules. So the mage does not care about the weight of the Mithril Plate, nor is he slowed down, nor does he have a spell failure chance or any problem casting spells in combat, because opportunity attacks do not happen when people cast spells in melee range. So a caster should also always shoot for Mithril Plate.
You heard it here right now. Wizards and Mithril Plate.
The standard. Not weird. That's what you're supposed to do.
This is a tragedy. This is almost having feats end at level 9 level of tragedy right here.
Almost.
Almost. This could ship this way, and people would bitch. But if it ships the other way, it'll just instantly dissipate, and Satan will enter our world and claim our mortal souls.
That is very true. Not as big a problem as feats, but that doesn't say much. Feats is a huge problem. This is a big problem. It's not the size of the Titanic, but it's big.
We're like comparing like Hindenburg and Titanic right now.
Yeah, exactly. Hindenburg was bad, Titanic was a little worse. They're both awful. Let's go on to something a little bit better. The weapons.
Yeah. Oh, phew. I was feeling a little sick right there.
Okay, so
Puke in the bathroom.
they still have those categories, simple, martial.
Perfectly reasonable. I've always sort of liked that system, so not every class has to say you're specifically proficient with blank, blank, and blank.
Yeah, it's a good overarching category system. Important change is crossbows are now martial, and bows and short bows are now simple. That's a minor thing, but it is worth noting. The other thing is that the range of ranged weapons has vastly increased. Note that the crossbow has a range of 120, which is the short ranged weapon. The heavy crossbow has a range of 400.
Whew.
Most of the bows, like the long bow, has a very long range, 600. Most of the short bows and other bows that are simple have ranges of 300. That is very long, which is actually kind of cool because most short bows are able to shoot beyond 80 feet.
I like it. It's realistic. I think it can cause some gameplay problems, which is why they didn't do it before.
Oh, it definitely caused some gameplay problems.
So I'm a little worried about that. The good news is, is the long range. Before, maybe it was like a -2 penalty, right?
Now it's disadvantage.
Disadvantage. So shooting from long range is a bigger deal than before, but still, when you're looking at the short range being 150, whoa, that's a lot of squares.
That is indeed a lot of squares. And remember, you now add your dexterity to your damage.
How many squares is that? 30?
Yep, I do believe so.
I don't have that much on my mat.
Exactly, like, really, the ranges have been upped, and it's both a blessing and a curse. Makes it harder for DMs to keep track of really anything unless they're pen and papering it.
I think that's what this is. I think that's where it comes from. Because they're focusing more on pen and paper, they're doing more of this kind of stuff.
And once again, it is cool in some respects, but it's also both very powerful and very hard to keep track of.
I think this will require a lot more playtesting before I really give it my final verdict. You know, I really feel like this could become a problem, but I'm not sure of it.
I mean, the problem I see is that if you're someone with a longbow and you're at 600 feet and you're about to ambush someone, you don't actually need to ambush them at all. You can scream to the heavens, "Hey, I'm over here," and then launch arrow after arrow into them, dealing as much damage as someone hitting them in the face with a short sword.
Yeah.
And by the time they get to you, they're dead, or very close to dead. You actually don't even have to put your longbow away if they get up to you, because you can just point blank shot them without opportunity attacks. Who cares?
That's very true. Because, so, an average character can move 60 feet per turn. So, it would take 10 turns of longbow shots to get into range.
Which all deal fairly grievous damage. Even the short bow, with a range of over 300, that's still 5 turns of you charging at full speed, or not charging technically, but running at full speed towards the attacker.
I really feel like I like the general trend of this, but 600, way too much. I think the maximum range that anything should be is 300.
Yeah,
even
probably.
if
it's
realistically it means, oh, that's shorter than that would be in real life. I don't care. For gameplay perspectives, 300 is more than enough range for anything.
And Wizards has cut it shorter before. It's not that hard to do. Sure, it's a compromise, but a compromise is needed.
For a longbow, maybe 100, 300. Something like that.
Perfectly fair.
You know, this can be like this could
80, 80, 250 or something.
Yeah, something like that. Just too much. Realism is good, but I think this will hinder gameplay too much.
It's also important to note that they do have some keywords. They just mean very little.
Hey, finesse does mean a lot. It means you use your dexterity rather than your strength.
That is true.
Which is pretty cool. You know, you're playing a dexterity class, you go for finesse.
Yeah, although finesse is a persistent thing throughout many systems.
Yeah, they've used it, but there's a lot of finesse weapons here. Is there usually this many, would you say?
No. A lot of the weapons have keywords that really don't matter at all. The two-handed is important, but it's not really a keyword.
Reach is important, but they don't have that many with reach.
Yeah.
But reach is a game changer, especially now that opportunity attacks are based on your reach.
Reach weapons are much more powerful for melee classes.
But it's also interesting, because if you're inside, you can move 1 square back from someone with reach and still not get opportunity attacked.
Because they're not outside of their reach.
Yeah. Light means a lot in terms of dual wielding. You can dual wield short swords, scimitars. Pretty much it looks like you can dual wield a lot of 1d6 weapons. I think that's the highest damage you can for that.
Which is perfectly fair. If it was a 1d8, then there'd be a very easy way to min-max. Since it's accessible to literally everyone, so every fighter should be two-handed in that scenario. Unless they're a tank.
Now let's talk about magic items for a moment. Magic items in D&D Next is one of my favorite things about it. Right from the get-go, the packet describes buying and selling magic items as something that's really hard to do. Not many people are willing to sell you magic items. Only the richest or the craziest of travelers would sell you a magic item. They're rare.
And this also means it's actually rather hard to sell them, because there aren't many people who really care about your necklace of fireballs. Maybe an adventurer wants to, or maybe someone who sells to adventurers, but the average Joe and average vendor doesn't give a crap.
Plus, he couldn't afford it.
Yeah, you couldn't afford it. They're vastly too expensive, and even a merchant might not have 50,000 gold for you.
So they just sort of established that magic items are truly magical and uncommon in the hands of the average person.
They're much more important than normal, which is a good thing to emphasize. Players don't feel like they can just pick up and throw away gear. No, each item counts.
And at the same time, unlike Pathfinder and 4E, they expect you to get items. You are actually balanced around getting magical items, and the game even has a suggested, like, oh, give your players this many magical items at this time. This assumes all magic items are gravy. They don't balance around you having a million magic items. They're like, they might have one magic item, so maybe we'll make it a little harder. But overall, they don't have any expectation of the player to have a certain number of magic items. That's up to DM's discretion.
There's actually a table in Pathfinder for projected character wealth at certain levels. So you can actually tell if you're over-geared or under-geared. And DMs will have to look at that. In this system, they say magic items are magical. You will find them when you do.
And in line with that, they tried to make the magical items not just stat bonuses. They're all sort of special. All of them can have a little bit of a story to them.
And don't get us wrong, there are indeed +1s and +2s, but there are vastly more bizarre items.
What I do like is they organize them by a rarity, which has a suggested character level. I don't really like the progression, but each rarity has a different sort of average value, so even if you don't know the exact value of an item, you can give it a general category and be able to eyeball it. And it also tells you the rarity, right in the name.
This also means that if you're a DM creating an item, you can roughly assess the value of it just by looking at what level you had it in mind for.
Alright, so all of these are interesting new sort of themes on it. They have a couple of cool things.
Like tables for
finding items. But no true big systematic changes until you come upon magic item attunement. So normally, in this system, unlike 4th edition, does Pathfinder? Well,
Pathfinder does have attunement.
You can wear any number of magic items as long as it makes sense, generally. Boots, you can't wear 2 pairs of boots, but 2 belts, yeah, sounds right. A lot of necklaces, yeah, sure. 10 rings, well, 20 rings maybe. All fine, as long as it, goes along with common sense. And since you're not supposed to get too many magic items,
it's okay. There shouldn't be an issue. But, 4 hats, no. Share them with your party.
So, but there is some items that are so powerful that if you could have any number of them, it'd just be absurd. So they made attunement. There's certain items that only function or have additional abilities when you attune them to yourself, and that's attuning them to yourself. That's a process of concentrating it on. You're concentrating on it for 10 minutes. Normal. It's a short rest.
But you may only have 3 items attuned to yourself at a time.
Which is a pretty cool. It limits your capabilities. Like, oh, you can have a bunch of magic items, but the really powerful and crazy magic items, 3. And since they truly want their magic items to be magical, 3 sounds like a good number.
And keep in mind, these are not just magic items, these are extraordinarily powerful ones. So they only actually bar you from using the craziest shit. Everything else, have as much as you want, as long as it makes sense. Once again, 20 rings? Sure. 4 hats? No. You might look ridiculous with 20 rings, but you are physically capable of wearing them without it being clumsy and awkward. Sure, it might eventually get hard to carry swords, but that's up to your DM to say, hey, you've got way too many rings, and perhaps it was his fault in the first place for giving you 20 magic rings.
Yeah, the system's a lot on DM's discretion. It's like, oh, we can trust the DM to not give you too many magic items. We'll just let the DM give you as many magic items as he thinks is fit. And they can wear as much magic items as the DM thinks is fit.
As long as it makes sense.
And then there's certain things where it's like, oh, but there is things that are so powerful that we do need to balance it a little bit ourselves, and three attunement items.
And this isn't actually a downside. This just means that they now have the ability to make items that are crazy powerful and really cool, as opposed to having to balance everything around being able to wear infinite amounts of it.
And I really like this compared to, like, really a Pathfinder. I believe your damage almost always scaled with, like, your magic items.
Yeah, gear matters so much in Pathfinder. They do have attunement, which is good, but it's a very gear-based system.
Incredibly gear-based. A lot of those things don't scale except for items. Like AC didn't scale.
Yeah, your AC doesn't really scale that much at all.
But you get items.
Like, maybe your class, if you were to focus on AC, would, if you min-max the hardest possible, would give you maybe a +5 or a +6 from levels 1 to 20.
But your gear would give you...
Your gear would give you maybe +10 to +30.
Yeah, something insane like that. So they want gear to feel special, but not just like some mandatory number that you have to add on to your character. Which I really like. And I've looked through some of these. They're pretty cool. A lot of old items, because they've been doing this since the fucking 70s. They have a lot of ideas.
And they're just all out right here. The nice part is if you scroll down for us to Katai, they actually have a bunch of details that you can just add to items. Most of them don't actually matter. A few do, but their effects are usually very mundane. For instance, key. The item is used to open or otherwise unlock a container, chamber, vault, or perhaps an entire tomb or dungeon. So for the rest of the campaign, you'll have this magic ring of necrosis that also happens to have a encrypted sigil key on it. It helped in the dungeon, but now you have that memory, and it's just an aesthetic pleasure.
It's really neat. They're trying to give us so much material to work with as a DM without hindering us or assuming things of us. Honestly, this is a DM's playground.
Absolutely. It's a lot of flavor stuff to give us more ideas, and a lot of freedom to execute those ideas.
But I think we've covered just about all of the core rules that D&D Next has to offer.
The packets are available for free. Keep that in mind. Feel free to visit Wizards of the Coast, and they'll send you one by email.
Make sure to check our further videos where we'll dive directly into certain classes and we'll dive into that delicious spell list. But that's generally what D&D 5e is all about. I hope you enjoyed.
And hey, if you cats want more content, just tell us.
Peace!